Hello and welcome back to the Edit Undo podcast. We have two amazing guests today. As you might have remembered in one of our previous episodes, we've had duos on before. But for the first time, we are having people who came from our previous guests' same organization. We are chatting with Claire and Paul today, two of the amazing designers at Jack Creative Studio. So you would have previously heard from Sabeeha in the last episode. And we dived into some of the details of how, where Jack is today, how they're approaching 2023 and their organization's journey. And we also started to touch a little bit about how Jack as a whole and the members in Jack think a little bit about how they engage with their customers and how they identify and define the problems which they're going to solve in their relationships. And today, what I'm hoping that we can uncover with Claire and Paul is getting a better understanding of, once you've got this client problem, once you've got an understanding of what the need is, how does that actually eventually turn into a real design or a product or whatever it might be that you're outputting? And that's kind of like the larger context of the conversation. But we will get there in due course. Before we get there, Claire, Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, Alfie. Great to chat to you.
So good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Amazing. So, to start with, before we kind of dive into all of those details, it will be good to roll the clock back a little bit and get a little bit of an understanding of the background or the superhero origin story. And Paul, maybe you can kick us off a little bit. And we can almost try to look at, between where your professional career started and try to get to what sort of eventually led you to Jack. And then we'll kind of hand over to Claire to sort of do the same. And then from there, we'll actually look at now, once you guys meet together in this organization, where does fate take you from there? So Paul, if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
Thanks, Alfie. Yeah, listen, definitely not a superhero story. I mean, that implies that a superpower was born out of something, didn't fall into any radioactive material.
Darn it.
A lot of effort. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess there's some sort of a lottery when it comes to what you're talented in. But, there's so many factors to that. So I must say I've always been interested in interfaces, in human interaction, in how people use technology. I remember myself in primary school, like gesturing in the air for these like floating 3D screens and apps. And now, we're finally getting there after how many years. So that's what I went and studied. And I saw software development as the logical place to do that, because then you can bring these things to life. And during the course of studying, realized, listen, I actually really enjoy the design aspect of it. So pivoted to that. My first professional year working was 2020. And in that year, I worked at a corporate company, mainly as a software developer, but did a lot of design there as well. And actually, that's where Sabeeha and I worked together. That was our first job that we had together outside of the Jack thing on the side at that point in time. But juggling with that, I was also completing my honors degree, and it gets hectic and it gets busy. And by the end of that year, I realized this in corporate is not for me. I want to determine my own destiny. So I actually went and lectured at the university for a year, teaching interaction design. And during that year, Jack ramped up, and that's when we decided to go full-time into it, which was only, last year is my first full-time year at Jack. And so far, we've worked together to bring many different products to life and learned a lot, but specifically around, exactly the question you're asking. Okay, we have the problem. How do we actually now solve it and bring it to life? And it's more than just hard work. There's a lot of coordination involved, but we'll get there. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And it'll be also cool to touch a little bit about how your lecturing experience sort of informed the work that you're doing now. But before we get there, Claire, do you mind giving us a little bit of the history? I know you maybe have a little bit of that entrepreneurial itch like myself. So it'll be cool also to touch on some of the previous projects that you've worked on, or maybe one of the ones that you're working on right now. And then also we could chat a little bit about how you kind of came to join this merry band of misfits.
Absolutely. Thank you. I too have to dispel the myth that there's any superhero cape on, like Paul did as well. I joined Jack last year. It's actually almost my first Jack birthday, which is very exciting. And I joined at a fairly tumultuous time in my startup career. I had burnout, which I think many multi-founders eventually experience. And working at Jack has just been such a wonderful, stable environment to start coming down from a very challenging startup life or career. So just to backtrack a bit, I studied journalism and English literature at Rhodes University. I'm not a journalist. I haven't spent a day of my career practicing journalism, but certainly the tenets of messaging and using design to communicate things to people has informed everything that I've done since, except for that one time I went teaching in South Korea. That the journalism degree didn't come into hand there either. But I've been working in startups since I got back to South Africa in 2014, across a few industries, fairly colourful industries, one of which was the erotic space, another was legal tech, and I work at Jack for 4 days of the week, and then I still dabble in the dark arts with, I suppose you could call it a date tech startup. So that's me in a nutshell. Fairly difficult to pin down as well, but I've tried.
You're so good at putting like just enough information in to make it sound super interesting. Death tech. That is the first time I have ever heard that.
Look, I hadn't heard about it. I hadn't heard about it either, and I have to say my family is rejoicing that I've shifted from sex tech to death tech because, it's I think these are all buzzwords that get you in front of the right investors and open the right conversations.
Can imagine.
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Amazing. No, I think that's really great, and it's cool to kind of like hear, in some ways, two very different stories that have kind of led you guys to where you are today. And so, one of the things that we're hoping to do was really identify, what it looks like when you guys are presented with a problem and how you think about that process. So maybe a place that we could start is, what does that actually typically look like? Imagine in our previous conversation, we might have imagined that Sabeeha gets a call from this random person. The person's interested in kind of like getting a little bit of work. They've had a look at your website. Also, guys, if you haven't looked at Jack Studio's website, give it a look. It's a work of art. But they're sort of interested. They kind of reach out to her, and Sabeeha's like, okay, this is a cool project, and it's something that we want to move forward with. Can you just walk us through, how do you guys see your roles at the organization? Who's responsible for what? Is there a distribution of duties? How does that typically work with you guys?
It depends on when you ask, okay? Because this is something that I'm serious, it gets redefined every 3 months. And we literally just a few weeks ago redefined it again. And that's the power of having a small team, is we can constantly be making these changes. But the thing that doesn't get redefined is our systematic approach to actually solving these problems and getting these projects up and running. And I think because we are all systems thinkers and that's our speciality, if that doesn't come through in the way you do business or the way in which the client experiences you, then there's obviously a problem there. So we have an incredibly in-depth, step-by-step, system that's the same for each project, but different enough and flexible enough to be able to facilitate all those edge cases. Usually that just involves, gathering the requirements, seeing, making sure we actually understand what the problem is, and then being able to sell them the right thing. So that's obviously where Sabeeha's job comes in the most, but we play a big part in that, because can we actually deliver on what the thing is? So that's the most important thing, is are we delivering or giving them the right services? And after that, actually executing on those services is pretty straightforward. I don't know, Claire, what's your experience been around that?
Yeah, so Paul spoke about some recent organizational shifts that we've had in Jack, and currently, with the full disclaimer that perhaps next time we speak, we've adapted once again. But currently, Paul sort of heads up the product department at Jack, and I head up the brand department. And so anything that lives in the app or the web app, I suppose, space is Paul's domain, and brand is mine. And, you know, when we kick off a branding project, it really is all about listening and really listening with huge amounts of curiosity and empathy, and listening with so many different sets of ears, listening with the ears that understand what the business is trying to do, what the value proposition is, what the problem is that's being solved, who it's being solved for, and then to almost retrospectively build, design, imagine, conceive a brand that is going to effectively communicate to the people who our clients, the entrepreneurs, are trying to solve for. Those are the most important people in the process. Obviously, we adore our clients and take their work very, very seriously. But at the heart, it's their customers, their users, who we are building brands to solve for, building products to solve for. And so, yeah, when clients come to us with their problems, their challenges, their with specific outcomes that they want, our job, certainly in the branding space, is to really listen first. So that's where things kick off on my side.
You know, you both mentioned the organizational changes you guys have been going through, and you have been doing that quite a few times. So I actually wanted to just pause on that point and ask what they were and how you came to those decisions, because that's quite interesting to hear, especially like Paul mentioned, you are a small team, so I'm assuming that was a collective input to make that shift for the better of all the individuals in that team. So if we can chat about that, and then I want to get a little bit more tangible about the examples you guys gave about how you actually get involved in from I have the requirements into starting a project. But let's maybe just go back to the shift in how we're working right now.
So before we had Claire, which was about a year ago, then we were 4 people, right? And Sabeeha was pretty much sitting in a similar role where she was running the business and doing sales and gathering requirements and getting the clients in. And we have 2 other incredible designers that we also work with. And it came to a point where I was managing all the client projects, and we have a lot of projects running simultaneously. So there's usually more than 10 at one time running. And this got extremely difficult for me to be able to manage the projects, manage the clients, make sure everything gets delivered, and also be executing on the work, which is what I really enjoy doing, is obviously solving the problems as well. So I ended up in a position that was, there was too much going on. And you know, we definitely would have been able to figure it out, but then Claire came in as a saving grace. I don't know, the universe gave her to us. And
superhero.
Very much, superhero, but not with no powers, obviously.
Yes.
And the goal there was for her to take on a lot of my responsibilities, and for me to move on into some of Sabeeha's responsibilities. And this is what we did. So I don't know, Claire, you can speak to where we were at the start of this year and what that structure looked like. And again, these structures worked at each point in time. And then, we adapt because times change. Exactly. So it's not like everything went wrong. It's like, yes, they worked really well, like just like the structure currently is working well. But yeah, Claire, maybe you can talk to what that second phase was when you came in at the start of this year.
Well, actually, hearing you talk about it, Paul, it makes sense that we've now had to change things organizationally, because in effect what we did was just change the people out, but in many respects the process remained the same. So you moved into Sabeeha's role, I moved into your role, and then we actually took on a lot of projects. The team at Jack had been doing some very big projects last year, and this year has been more rapid-paced, fast cycle, certainly smaller by comparison projects. To say it was somewhat chaotic, the clients, I hope, didn't ever feel that chaos, because I think we're quite good at doing the whole paddle furiously beneath the water, but, float like a poised
Look
swan.
like a graceful swan above water.
I mean, I hope so. But really what we came to is that in order to go deeper and deliver even more exceptional standards of work, we needed to really create more time and more space for the kinds of thought and process and introspection and internal alignment and collaboration within our team, in order to push even further and elevate our standards even further. And so that's exactly what we did. We decided that instead of one individual, me at the start of this year, and like Paul said, him last year, carrying the full client suite and managing the full bouquet of products, projects, brands, etc., we would divvy it up so that the two, the two expert areas could be properly sunk into and grounded into, and that we could spend more time and execute to greater depth across brand and across product. So that's what we've done.
And it took me to admit that, listen, I actually don't enjoy not doing the creative work and just doing, it's really interesting and stimulating, and definitely that's going to continue, the discovery of clients, the sales, all of that. But listen, we creatives really enjoy doing things. So now Claire and I are actually physically executing as well as managing projects, but now it's split up between, and you can see on our website, it's quite a similar structure. It's product and system, and then it's site and branding. And those two things are very interlinked, and we still function as one organism, but it helps a lot to offload that. I mean, we're 5 people. We don't need managers in the company. That doesn't make sense. So it took us a while to realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's easy to almost kind of like shrug that off as something small, but I think there are many people who, in a sense, were the same as you. You sort of assume that you need this managerial structure because everybody does it. And then eventually, you get to the point where you're like, okay, yes, everybody does it, and it may work for them, but maybe this is not what we need. And when you are 5 people, you can afford to try out all of these new and kind of like somewhat odd or unconventional things. And I think Jack has actually been a great example of that in very many ways, from the way you guys treat holidays, to the way you guys treat spending social time together, to the way that you engage with your customers. I've had the pleasure of working with Sabeeha on a couple of sales calls over the past 2-3 weeks. And it really is something to kind of like see you guys in action. And I'm hoping that we can dive a little bit more into that. But before we do, I want to hone in on something, because there's something that you mentioned, which Sabeeha also mentioned in her episode. And it was talking about this idea about not going broader, but going deeper. And I think there's something really important there, especially because when you think about a lot of small companies, the only way they think about growth is either by hiring more people or getting more customers. It's very rarely to provide more value to the customers that you already have, and then also to look at customers that are looking for that partner that wants to go deep. So can you maybe talk a little bit about, for you guys personally, what do you think Maybe Claire, you could you could start off by talking to us a little bit about what you believe it means to go deeper from a brand perspective, and then Paul, from your side, maybe you can chat a little bit about what you think it means to go deeper from a product and systems perspective.
Sure, I love this question.
Sure. We're living in such interesting times, just to zoom out a little bit into the current, I guess, milieu that we find ourselves in, one that is very much marked by AI, by this instant commoditization of design. You know, I signed up for a pro mid-journey account a couple of months back just to experiment with it. And, you know, by writing a comprehensive brief, you can generate a full website. I got an email the other day from a website building platform called Framer telling me that I could talk a website into existence. You know, you can go onto Fiverr and pick up really good logos, for example, for a handful of dollars. And so in our world, we've got to really think about, what does depth mean in an environment and in an industry where we're seeing literally developments happening on a daily basis, becoming more sophisticated and more intelligent. How do we stay ahead of that curve, and how do we stand out in a mass of design assets? And for us, the answer is going deeper. So what does that mean specifically in the world of Jack? And for us, it comes back to who we're solving for, who we're solving problems for. So obviously, like I said earlier, we are literally solving for our clients. They come to us and they say, hey, we need a brand that does this. We want an app that does that. But the real people we're solving for are their customers and their users. And for us, going deep means really getting into the hearts and the souls and the problems and the pain points and the experiences and the lives of those people. Because a $2 logo is very, very different from a logo that has been deeply, deeply considered from the point of view of what is going to resonate with. And I say logo, I mean, I shouldn't really be using that example. Let's speak more broadly about a brand or an app. That how is it solving for those people? And that for me at the heart of it is what depth means. So really getting into the psyche of the people you're solving for, and then designing from that, using that as a point of departure. It's too easy for design to look really, really good, and even to function really, really well at face value. But depth comes in when you are truly solving and truly connecting. And not every beautiful logo is going to achieve that. Not every well-designed app is going to achieve that. So that's where I believe our depth comes in, is listening and understanding what people's pain points are, and then designing to solve that. Because without that happening, you're designing the wrong thing. You're designing in the wrong direction. So
yeah. Amazing. That's beautiful. And Paul, I'm going to let you dive directly into that.
Yeah, I love that, Claire. And that's definitely the start. I mean, we're designing for people, and humans need to be able to use this and, you know, enjoy using things, even if it's something for death. Yes, it's sad, but and when you look at Claire's startup, it's just, you know, that's what it resonates. It's creating experiences that people that either are invisible, but actually not invisible. You want them to feel better. You know, people's lives aren't always going that well, and why would you want to block them from that? And that's just going to improve everything for the business owner as well. But a distinction I'd like to make is the distinction between having higher standards and producing higher quality work versus going deeper. So yes, we strive to create the highest quality work, and we've always done that. Like pixel perfect, you know, everything's aligned perfectly. It follows all design standards, you know, it caters for all biases. It, you know, we went through the whole process. We name our layers in Figma. Like it's insane, right?
That's when you know you're a professional.
And that's the thing. Like we come in there, and then Yeah, and like they're scared or not scared. We're open to that. It's like, okay, I'm now going to be extremely nitpicky about this because it needs to have this, level of craftsmanship. So that's quality, and that's something we've always, strived for, and that's something that you can, learn to do in university and, do that well. But if you're doing the wrong thing, then what's the point of it? So going deeper in product is more about offering more value to the business owner, even beyond this thing that we're designing. It's, listen, okay, this is what you think you need. Great. Here is a lot more information around it. Here are suggestions to where you could push this, like what would maybe be a different approach that could work better to achieve these goals. Because, that's what we're good at. We're good at visualizing what an entrepreneur, what they want or what this big idea is. A lot of the time people can't see it. And we can show that to them, but we can also show them, a better version of it, right? It's like, what are your business goals? What are you trying to achieve? And how can we, instead of just being a tool that you use, how can you be, a partner and someone you can walk with? So that's where product comes in versus just UX, UI design. Product design involves, all aspects of the business. It involves the stakeholders who are funding this thing. We need to take them into consideration. Since we don't do development and we work with dev partners, we work with developers a lot, how do we make sure that this thing that's designed actually gets built the way it was intended to be designed, right? We're naming layers
question of designers.
Figma. Like, what does that matter if it's not built to that standard, right? Yeah. Or the essence of what's built isn't being transferred over, the brand isn't being communicated effectively. So, it's about adding on those pieces that are way broader than just executing on the work, creating something pretty. And do you even need to build a custom thing? Like, yes, great, we're going to make more money, right? Give us your money, we can build a massive system. But do you need that? Or could we create something that's way simpler using, as Claire said, existing tools that are very easy to implement, but can prove your concept to actually see or test certain things out? Like, it's very much about giving the right advice versus, giving advice that's just going to benefit us as a company.
The right type of value. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things I was hoping we could talk about, and I will sort of leave it up to you guys to decide how much about the project that you want to share. But there's one specifically that I'd like to highlight, because one of the things I think that has stood out to me about Jack from the beginning is this sort of idea. And it's the first thing that somebody sees when they come to your website. It's like, we help founders visualize their dreams. Now, in a sense, that's a lot of people say things like that. And then when you go to the first meeting, they're like, yes, but we also cost $1 million. and so, like, I think one of the things that you guys have done that has been super interesting is working with founders when they're still in their proof of concept stage, and then kind of building the relationship so that in the future, when they do have the opportunity to take that next step, they already have a relationship with you. They've already built that trust. So can you talk a little bit about the logic of that, a little bit outside of the business perspective? And can you talk a little bit about it from this perspective of going deeper in terms of how you design, thinking specifically about this founder who is on this journey at different stages where they really don't have money, and then they've got a little bit more money, and then they've got a lot of money, and how you guys sort of walk them through that journey?
Oh, you can empathize the best, Claire. So I think you can start with this one since you're a founder yourself.
So this was before I joined at Jack, and Paul, you can definitely add to this, but my understanding is that Jack ran a startup boot camp for ambitious and hardworking and just, sparkly founders who were doing cool things. And it was then, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, that you guys connected with and worked for the founders of Loop. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Alfie, to go back to your point of what depth looks like in our world, Paul and Sabeeha and the team designed a visual aesthetic for this nascent we're going to revolutionize the taxi industry set of founders who like big heart, big dreams, big ambition. And that's exactly what Paul and Sabeeha did. They created this beautiful aesthetic, and off the founders went. And it has circled back again. What we literally closed our last quarter with was a brand new website for Loop, who are just innovating and expanding their value proposition by the minute in extremely, extremely exciting ways. And Jack is along for the ride. In fact, when we took our last brief from Loop, it was for a very specific, the marketing and communication of a very specific aspect of their value proposition. And when we met last week or the week before to take feedback from them, they were so excited because they had just innovated a whole new value proposition. And oh my gosh, how do we communicate this?
Nice.
It's an electric environment to be in because we are literally walking the journey with these people as they build the car and drive it simultaneously and raise additional rounds. And so in that case, in the case of Loop, it really did begin when they were just dreaming. They were dreamers, and now they are formidable founders who are causing waves and living their dream of revolutionizing the way that people in our country get to work every day, get to work and home. So it's inspiring and a great privilege to be walking alongside with them. And there are a number of clients, who have walked a journey, whether it be they've come to us with more established funding and are now moving into scale-up territory, whether it's, very, very early stage founder who've now gone ahead and raised. That's also part of what depth means, walking alongside these people for longer, doing more for them, obviously as budget allows and as their needs demand.
So we've quite a lot of, we've chatted a bit about now this concept of broadening out and deepening downwards or inwards. I am curious still, though, if you tell any creative or actually any type of executional discipline, go deeper. That can spiral out, that can, prolong a project on a practical level. If you tell that to stakeholders, that might scare them because that might mean, oh shit, the project's going to take longer. We need more resources now. We might not get to the solution sooner. It's also very difficult then, if this is the first time you're going deeper and not broader, what is deep enough? Where do you kind of stop? I'm very curious to hear from both of you because now we have two perspectives, which is the brand and the actual UI, UX design. How does that play out in your actual creative process? How do you know when you're going deep enough and you kind of feel cool, this is good enough, this is deep enough, let's continue further on, and still keep it within the constraints of the project, timelines, budget, all of that?
Well, here's the first thing to mention. That going deeper doesn't mean that we need to go as deep on every project, right? Because going deeper definitely means, yes, it's going to take longer, it's going to cost more. That's how we're growing the business, right? And as you said, it's a different way of growing the business. So although that's part of what we're doing, it's obviously not all that we do because we're really good at getting to the solutions fast. I remember when we were just starting, it's like, why do we need this piece of the process? Let's just chuck it, like we can do it. Let's just go faster. And that allowed us to be able to offer the services that we do for the, the price and the timeline that we do. So the question there is, it's what's the appetite of the client at the end of the day? How deep how much value do they want? Like how important is this thing for them and how important is it for them to get to a solution that's the best possible solution, and are they willing to invest in that? And that's the starting point of it. And at the end of the day, that's I would say that's the core of it. So yes, all of those constraints and things, we definitely, again, we're not superhuman or superhero, so we can't just scale things infinitely. It will come at a cost and at a timeline. But at the end of the day, it really depends on, and to what Claire was saying, like, what is the requirements for this project, and how important is it for us to actually do proper research and understand the full aspect. Let's say we want to go deep into research. Is this a topic or an area where we need more expertise, or does the client have a lot of knowledge on this and they feel like, they have enough to work with that we can actually execute on that? I know that one of our clients, they're called Viva, they have a whole sustainability team, and it's a sustainability platform and tool. They have a whole sustainability team that we worked with. So therefore, that big research on sustainability part of the process wasn't necessary to be there. They also have an in-house dev team, and they have their own product owner. So although they're a startup, they have a lot more in place that can sort of take the load off of us, so we can focus on building out a bigger system for them. Whereas now one of our new client, we're designing an Islamic banking platform specifically for Islamic investments. And with that, there's a lot more that you need to know and be knowledgeable around in terms of how investments work, and actually, how these people come onto the platform, how they're going to be using it, the target audience. So that's why there we're going way deeper in research to make sure that, listen, we're catering for, this huge community of people who've been left out of the normal Western investment system, right? How do we actually make this an experience that caters to them? So, I hope that sort of slightly answers your question. It's extremely contextual, and it depends on project to project, and it depends on, it depends on the numbers, but it also depends on what is the problem that needs to be solved. And
Claire,
who's the client?
Continue,
what team do they have?
I quickly want to jump onto something Paul said that just triggered a thought in me, which is, when we know a topic because we've either dabbled in it before, something we're familiar with. Let's say for us, it's Flip, a food ordering app. We all use one. We've all probably designed one. We're familiar with how it works. We tend to not go as deep. When it's a topic we're unfamiliar with, we go deeper. But that's also a very interesting assumption we're making of ourselves and our practice and our creative process, right? Is that something you've noticed that you? How can I phrase this question? Have there been projects where you are familiar with the topic, but even though you feel very comfortable, very confident, very familiar, you're still trying to go deeper?
That's an excellent question.
I feel like I have a little bit of a response to that, because we're in some sense in the same industry, so it's a question that I too have spoken about. So Steph, I'm going to just steal the mic for a second and answer your question, and then I'll let you guys kind of pick up from there. And the only reason that I want to answer this is because my opinion has changed recently. So for a long time, I thought that even if you're a professional in a space, it is still valuable for you to continue to go deeper. And the design process almost dictates that. It's like you have got these kind of biases because you're in the space. So you kind of need to ensure that your process takes care of those biases. And that makes sense from the perspective of the design. Where my mind has been starting to shift a little bit is the cost of doing that worth it? Because the cost of not doing research when you're not a professional is you getting the project absolutely wrong, because you don't know and you're not doing research.
Of course, yeah.
Now, when it's a space that you're a professional, the cost of getting it wrong is getting it kind of wrong, but you know enough to get it at least somewhat right at a much cheaper cost. And especially from the perspective of a founder, that's a narrative that can make sense. And I think my perspective has only changed because I'm trying to be a founder now, and I'm actually thinking about what is the cost of doing the research when you know nothing, and what is the cost of doing research when you actually have got a foundational understanding. And to me, those are, from the perspective of only the design process, those are the same thing. But when you're taking the cost of design as well, one side to me seems to be leaning a little bit heavier. I don't know if you guys have a different perspective.
Well, I think the stakes are very high. And I say that because I too have designed out for my own startup, and you make assumptions about what you know, what you think you know, and at face value, people affirm certain things which re-triggers your own biases. You have confirmation bias. And then you go out and you build an app that has a lot of zeros next to the number. And then you put it in front of people and you ask them to pay for it. And you realize that it's one of the most expensive mistakes you've made. And that's not a story that's distinctive or personal to me. That's almost like, earning your founder stripes is making that mistake where you realize that your biases are your biggest blind spot, because it's not about you. It's about the people who you are solving for. And it's the easiest thing to forget. And it's so embarrassing to say that, because I have absolutely done that at enormous cost. And I don't think that you can be deeply familiar with and a domain expert on certain industries and sectors, but there is always something new to learn from the people whose problem you're trying to solve. There's always depth there. There's always nuance. There's always more. And I think it is the most expensive thing to forget, and also one of the easiest things to forget, most especially in the world of founders, because you have to be so confident. You have to be, because everything else is kicking you down and people are saying no right and center. But you have to be so confident and convicted by your beliefs. But yeah, it's an expensive, it's like a tightrope to walk between designing what you think you should be designing and then actually solving for people. So yeah, I guess I have to answer that question with wearing two hats, like a professional who does the stuff for other people, and then also a founder who's designed absolutely the wrong thing.
And this is why it's great that Claire and I are both in this conversation, right? So for me as a designer, that's obviously one of the first things you're taught is, all your personal biases come into play, and you need to be careful of that. And then as soon as you move into the business side of things, not as a founder, but as, someone who's running a studio and needs to make money, you're like, okay, but, it doesn't compute. If we need to do all of this, we can't offer value to the people we want to offer value to, who are the people who might not have the budget for it. So we got, as I mentioned earlier, we got really good at keeping pieces of the process that needs to be there and not including the ones that don't need to be there. So again, with going deeper, it's definitely, and I totally agree with what you say, Alfie, as well. Again, I think we have a similar perspective there on, and then obviously that's going to hurt a founder if they're building the wrong thing. So that's why from the start, we need to make sure that we're giving the founder the right thing. Like when we meet with them for the first time, we have the discovery sessions. Are we selling you the right services? Will you need research to this nth degree? Do you need a full custom solution, or do you need a proof of concept that can be cheaper and quicker to do? So once the process has kicked off, I would say it's way more important to catch those things from the start and make sure that okay, we're actually working with someone who is who knows that this thing is going to work, or they don't know. So maybe we need to offer them a different set of services. And that's where we need to tailor that solution to every individual separately. Yeah.
Steph, I'm also interested to hear what your thoughts are on your question.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it started with you, and you also are a designer.
You know, I was thinking as Claire was talking that I wonder if the best solution is to always throw the most inexperienced people into a specific domain, because they might do the most amount of research and effort to gain domain expertise compared to someone who actually knows the topic, and what those two different outcomes would be is like a little experiment. Yeah, I actually feel personally, I feel more comfortable dabbling in domains I'm not an expert in, because I feel like it forces me to really lean on my methodologies and process a lot more than I would when I'm comfortable. And then I get uncomfortable because I'm not leaning on it. But I was also thinking, you know, you guys work at a studio where you have to deal with founders, and founders are generally very passionate people because they have something they believe in and they're putting a lot on the line for something they believe in. So they're quite not adamant, but they're just really strong-willed to get to a certain place because they have such a strong belief in something. And then this whole topic we're trying to frame around the customer needs. So let's say you want to go deeper in a specific topic for the Islamic Bank project, but the founder is happy with what you're showing them, but you know you need to go deeper still to actually get to deliver a solution which will meet the customer need, or even go further and beyond than meeting the customer need. How do you then balance that depth as well between the founder is happy with like this surface level depth and you kind of know it's not? Because that's really hard, because your relationship with founders are really strong, really important, but you're also the advocate for the user.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Claire, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think if there came a time, and I don't think that there has just yet, I mean, in my experience of being with Jack, where we fundamentally cannot stand behind sign off. Like, we've put work out, and I don't know, actually, because I don't think that we typically put work out that we can't really stand behind, and then also take it on the chin.
That was I was getting to as well. Like, do you tell the client that, like, no, I need another week, not because you don't have anything, but because you know you still need to go deeper, so you hide it?
Look, I mean, I think at the end of the day, have we asked for more time and said, listen, we've completed this portion and we actually need a bit more time on the second half? Absolutely. And I think we would so much rather deliver to a standard that we can really get behind versus, just meeting the deadline for the sake of it. I mean, it's always a balance to try and strike, obviously, but I think I would like to say that if we came to a point where we were just not happy with where we were getting to with the project, that we would take it on the chin and start again and get it over the line for the client. I
think just a couple of things I want to add to that, and I'll sort of do it on Sabeeha's behalf, because she previously mentioned it in our conversation. But I think one of the interesting things about the way Jack works is how you guys actually prevent that situation from happening. Because when I kind of started on the software side of the project that I'm doing, Campfire, I kind of worked with Sabeeha on actually working out what the requirements for the project are and what the goals are outside of the software and the brand needs. Speaking specifically about what my goals as a founder were, and what exactly those goals are and when specific targets need to be met. Now, when you're talking about just the creative process outside of the context of the founder's objectives from a timeline perspective, it's difficult to say when you go deeper and when you advise the client to just skip going deeper and meeting their specific goal. But I think sort of having gone through that process with Sabeeha and getting to see her pull out the business goals first before talking about the software helped me see in my solution that there are parts that I wanted to build that I didn't have to build, especially for what I'm looking to, because I'm in the proof of concept stage. I don't actually really need a piece of software. A simple marketing website might be enough, and then a live experience on the back end, which I manage myself. And it's only when you look at the needs of the business outside of the actual software needs that you can actually identify that and say, maybe we don't need to do the research into an interface now because we don't need an interface. And I think that's one of the really cool things about how this idea of identifying the customer needs first, and then looking at what solutions you have in your tool belt to actually address those.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, maybe one of the things that would be cool to hear a little bit more from you about is some of the tools in your tool belt. And I think what I want to get into is more about the types of work that you guys do, because I think we've spoken very broadly about this idea of brand and this idea of product and systems, and going deeper in each of those lanes. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the industries that you're doing that in. So if you don't mind, so we've talked about Loop, which is a sort of transportation startup. And then we briefly also mentioned Weaver, which is in the sustainability space. But it sounds like, at least from what we've discussed so far, that your focus is really on founders and small businesses. Like, do you guys look to work with bigger companies, with some of the corporates, the people who have a lot of money and not a lot of understanding about the creative process? Like, who are the types of people you guys try to work with, and what domains are you sort of interested in working in?
Yeah, so listen, we are very particular about, the kind of projects we take on and who we work with. So we've realized that, the bigger corporates aren't what we gel with well, because as we said, we like to have more input in that and make sure that what we deliver is the right thing and is a good thing. And that starts all the way with sales. And I don't think we ever will deliver something that we're not, that doesn't meet our standards or doesn't, fit with, that project won't even make it into the door if it's something that we don't agree with, I guess, or don't want to be working on. So maybe that's why we're trying to answer that question, because it hasn't happened yet, because it's been, I don't know, it's, especially like that. And that's Sabeeha, like, she's really good at holding that flag and making sure we don't have to deal with any of that.
Sussing out people,
Definitely.
Exactly.
And maybe if you can just speak to that a little bit, because one very interesting thing that I learned that you guys do is you guys decide whether you want to keep a client or not. And you guys also fire your clients if they're not behaving, which is quite an interesting thing to think about. But I think, in a sense, what it does is kind of not put you in this position where you're not where you're doing work that you don't believe in. So can you talk a little bit about how you guys actually think about that before moving forward? Think about this idea of finding the clients that you want, that have the types of projects that you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's if anyone has the answer to that, we'd not. Please give that to us. So the quick answer is we don't know. We're figuring it out. Jack started off purely on referrals. So just people who knew people, and generally people who are like-minded know each other. And that's people who are willing to collaborate, and people who want to make change for good. I guess that's the main thing in there. And it's a two-way street. Just like when you go for a job interview, I don't know, people always feel like they're begging for this job, but I mean, you're interviewing them just as much as they do. You want to spend 8 hours of your day every day there. So it's the same. Do we want to be spending all this time working on, regardless of the money, right? How do we feel as human beings when working on this project? So, I think it's very valid and makes a lot of sense to be able to fire clients. We haven't done that a lot. We're not We
Yes.
because we
Not
make
a
sure
lot
that
means
we
more than
work-
once.
we don't have to get into that at all.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I would say currently what we're looking at a lot is building out partnerships. So making sure, and this is, where Sabeeha focuses a lot of her energy is how do we have the right kind of work come in from the right areas? And a big part of that is, partnering with dev companies, for example. They have a lot of founders coming to them with work they want to get done, but they don't have the design expertise to do that. So how can we assist each other in that way? That's a big thing. Working with people like the Founders Institute, which is where, a lot of our clients also come from, giving them discounts, on if they come to us from there, doing mentoring for these programs. So, that's not something we've cracked yet. LinkedIn is a great tool, and Claire is great at putting herself out there. So Claire runs our LinkedIn, and she posts some really stunning things on there. Just a spoiler alert: it's not Jack posting; it's Claire. It's about being loud and being proud. Pride Month has a few hours left, I guess, or a few days left. We can be proud about the work that we do because it's the right kind of work.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess that answers the question within the question, but not the question.
The second half of the question. I think why I wanted to highlight that, and I know it's a little bit of a strange thing to talk about the clients that don't necessarily work out how you would like them to, but I think it's an important thing to highlight, especially because a lot of designers find themselves having agreed to a project and have then later down the line, especially when you're a freelancer and you don't have the people to back you to say that maybe this is not a good relationship to move forward with. They end up working on that project forever just because they've said yes at the beginning, and then it turned out not to be the relationship it presented itself to be. And so I think specifically for our audience to know that there does come a time where maybe you give your clients money back and you tell them like, thank you, but this is where it ends.
Yes.
Sometimes your sanity is worth that money.
Not your sanity, just your general well-being. Are you a happy person? Do you get excited about this project? We don't talk bad about any of the project, any of the clients. Like whenever we sigh or something, when a project name comes up, then listen, there's something wrong. Either there's we need to work on the relationship with them, or we're not solving something that feels like it should be solved. It's the same in an office. Like you don't want to be talking about other employees behind their backs. Then clearly there's a toxic culture there. So that definitely extends to the people we work with, clients, vendors, and anyone in the circle. We just want to be, a group of really cool people that enjoy working together and make some. I know it sounds lofty, but it's possible. It does take a lot of effort, but it's possible,
Yeah, the cost to business outside of, humans not feeling great about coming to work, the cost to business from a productivity perspective is just too high. If you've got people who are not able to perform the way that they want to and like to because, the interpersonal dynamics are problematic, or, there are lots of reasons why a client interaction or relationship it doesn't happen often, but it happens, and it just doesn't make sense from an actual black and white and bottom line perspective to pursue that, because you always lose money in the end, outside of the stress and angst and sleepless nights and wrinkles. It just doesn't make monetary sense at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to point out, because I think us as designers sometimes like to talk about the feelings and how our mental health is so much more important than the profit. But I think it's also important to highlight that even the prophet says the same thing. It's not just people's feelings.
No.
Like people not enjoying the work that they do slows down their productivity, which costs money.
There's that saying of happy cows, yummy milk or something. Like happy cows, breast milk. And you cannot have, especially in a creative space where you're having to tap into something beyond like black and white thinking, that is some infinite resource. And when you're stressed, it's difficult to get into the flow of creative output.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's expensive to work with clients.
100%. So we're at the hour mark, and I'm hoping that we can maybe just do a very short look at one of the projects before we sort of wrap things up. And I'm just gonna share my screen quickly on the project that we choose to look at. I think Weaver might be a good example because we spoke very briefly about it.
I think we can do Weaver. I'll talk a bit about that, and then Claire, you can talk about, what do you want to talk about? Lula is a really cool one. There's so many, and they're also cool.
Okay.
But Claire, you can choose what your one is going to be.
Cool. I'll give you a second to decide, Claire, while I let kind of Paul walk us through some of the thinking on Weaver. So one of the reasons that I'd like to do this is next in the lineup, we're going to be having a conversation with Dylan and Claudia, the other two amazing designers that you'd mentioned earlier. And what we're going to look at how your roles sort of tie together with some of the work that they do in Jack. And so it would be good to start off the conversation with you guys and introduce the project from the customer needs perspective, and maybe lay up some of the conversations into some of the design choices, so that when we open up that next conversation, we can dive deeper into some of those details.
Excellent.
Cool. So I'm kind of just going to pull this up, and I'll sort of let you walk us through a little bit of it, and I'll kind of let you determine how you kind of want to approach that. But maybe to start a little bit with like a brief overview of kind of like the project and who it was about, and then I'll kind of like let you speak.
Great. Yeah. So Weaver is all about sustainability in the tourism industry, and they definitely have ambitions to go out beyond that. But at this point, that's where their main focus is. And when I say that, it's about all these lodges and hotels, and people travel all over the world, and all of these places where people travel, they use resources. People work there. A lot of the times they're in locations where maybe the labor laws aren't as great as other areas. So how do you make sure, as a company or as a tourism company, that you are actually delivering something that's sustainable, not just for the planet, that's obvious, but also for the people, right? So the term around that is ecotourism. So we really love sustainability because we obviously love doing things that we think are going to make an impact, broader than just ourselves or, our communities, but, a bit further than that. So Weaver came to us with a daunting task, and that's to essentially digitize the knowledge that these PhD sustainability experts had in their heads. And a lot of them work specifically at lodges, mostly high-end lodges, because those are the only ones who can afford it. So how do you, democratize that a bit and make it available to more people? And it's millions and millions of lines of Excel sheets everywhere. And how do we take years of study and knowledge and learning these systems, creating these elaborate tracking tools and mechanisms, and how do we put that into a product that can actually be used by everyone? So the question is, have we achieved that goal? We're busy finding out because it's actually live, right? And that's one of the great things about Weaver is, they are well funded, so they were able to build out this product quite quickly, and we are already busy now with them on an ongoing basis, doing improvements and seeing what customers are saying. And it's very interesting, all of the things that are coming out there. So this is one where it was a massive undertaking, and we just needed to dive straight in to actually get it to something that could go to market. So we started out with the basics, defining what the design system is going to be, essentially the digital style guide that the dev team needs to use to actually define all of the different elements of this product and how they all link together and come together. We did not do branding for Weaver. That was done by a company called Riverbed. They did an excellent job on this. So we took that and translated it into, and based on all of their guidelines, translated that into an interactive document. So what's great is now all the new features or new elements that are being created, it's very easy to do so because everything's in one place. So once we did that, the most daunting task was definitely the actually defining what the system needed to be. So the system design part, and we call it system design and not wireframing because it's a lot. It sort of merges. As I said, we really like to combine things and give the client the highest value deliverable possible. So we sort of combine flow mapping and wireframing to something where they can visualize the user flow and the information needed without focusing on things like layout, but also making it that they can actually click through it and experience this thing. So, it was a very low fidelity approach. We had 6 weeks to map out this entire platform. And after we did that, very close, tight-knit meetings, what's great and how we love to work is to have all the meetings set up at the start of a project. So you know exactly on this date, in 2 months' time, we're going to deliver this thing, right? We're going to deliver the second milestone for the UI, for example, and user testing starts on this date. So this needs to be done here. And the team at Weaver were incredible at following along with that. I mean, it definitely happens that, things get delayed here and there because of feedback time. That's why we don't generally work with corporates, and we prefer, a more nimble team to work with so they can actually give that to us. But yeah, the UI design, we got that out. I think this project in total took about 3 months to execute. And then at the end of it, they're like, great, can you do some tutorial videos for us? We're like, yes, of course. We love to showcase a product, and we got a voiceover artist, and we created some really cool videos that showcases the project that they can use in their marketing, also in their sales process, but also just to give people an overview of how the system actually functions and works. In addition to that, we did their marketing website design for them as well, which their developers built out to actually showcase this project. So you can go check that out and just get to know a bit more about all the features this thing has to offer. It's quite a lot.
Nice.
And yeah, then after that, it's been ongoing design work for them. So advising them on how to tackle new features, hearing feedback from them, and testing out all these iterative updates as things come out. So this has definitely been one of the biggest projects we've done in terms of actually just amount of information we needed to absorb and become experts on this new field. And Stephen, I definitely agree with you. I also really enjoy getting a project where it's a new industry or a new field that you're not familiar with, because that's where obviously the most growth happens, and you definitely think differently about things. But yeah, that's Weaver. So check it out. I think it's going to have a big impact on sustainability. Maybe one day when you travel, you need to go and check the Weaver score for that property if you want to go travel there or not.
Amazing. Amazing. And I think that's it's been so cool to kind of like hear you walk through this project, and I'm sure James would have kind of done his amazing wizardry to bring some of those visuals into the conversation as you're speaking. And I think, like, for the people sort of watching on the video, and for those listening, I'd advise you to just hop over to YouTube or your friendly local video platform to kind of look a little bit at some of what we're seeing, because as good as it is to hear you describe this process, I think as we see the concepts and the principles we've been talking about in the episodes till now, and actually see how that actually translates to outcome is very interesting. And I think it's going to be amazing for us to sort of now walk into another depth of detail when we have the conversation with Dylan and Claudia.
Yeah.
But it would be cool. It would be cool to hear a little bit more about how you guys as Jack think about some of your more brand focused projects. Claire, I don't know if there's a specific one that you would like us to walk through.
Yeah, let's quickly go through Lulo. So if you just scroll down to the bottom of this page, I think I spotted it there. There we go. So Lulo is a chatbot enterprise. They do white label chatbots leveraging WhatsApp. And it was a very interesting challenge for us because we started right at the beginning with naming in terms of helping the client select a name for this very engaging, friendly little bot. So, the name in and of itself embodies that, and actually took on a bit of a personality of its own. We put together a marketing website and branding for this client. And what they're selling is conversational technology. So there's a whole bunch of really interesting compliance-related stuff that they are able to achieve for various financial institutions through WhatsApp, like FICA and RICA and so on. Quite complicated compliance-related processes, which they are putting into people's back pockets. You're able to do these things that you would only do at banks in years, decades gone by. So the whole purpose of this brand was to convey conversation, human empathy, dialogue, interaction, engagement. So if you just scroll down, I think there's a bit of a showcase of the branding that we ended up doing. We did brand inception, so Jungian archetype selection. Stephanie, to your question about what does depth look like. So, we really like to think intellectually about the brand persona versus, so for us, depth would be presenting a brand inception document to a client and then one logo option, for example, versus, here are 15 logo options, but none of them have been thought about on a cerebral level. They all look nice, but there's no theory behind them. So for us, depth can look like that as well, just thinking deeper about a certain output. So, we did brand inception for these clients, and then we moved into the brand identity, which was really fun. And my colleague Dylan really knocked it out of the park. We tried to embody the robot, the conversation, the friendliness in the typography itself, which the clients absolutely loved. So we were so chuffed with this piece of work. And then we moved into a marketing site, which was a joy to do because we were able to just encapsulate, I think, very well this conversational characteristic of the technology. So that was a really fun piece we did, and Dylan had great fun. So he'll speak passionately about it.
And I definitely look forward to it. But I think there's one thing that I want to touch a little bit on, just because I have, I guess, a little bit of a personal interest in it as well. And it's this idea of going deeper. And you kind of mentioned a little bit about the Jungian archetypes. And I think it's just so great to hear about how you guys are thinking about that specific element of deeper, because I think for a lot of graphic designers in this space, and for, I'd say, a lot of creatives, there's always this sort of like weird dilemma that we don't really focus on too deeply. And it's a strange thing of like, you can have one logo that's sold for a million rand that looks roughly the same as a logo that was sold for like 5,000 rand, which is somewhat similar to the logo that costed 500 rand. And then the question is, what is the difference in value in each of these? Because each of them eventually is like a PNG file or a SVG that you're going to now go and paste in all of these things. And then you kind of talked about this idea of Jungian archetypes. And I think this is really where illustratively we can see the difference between a logo that is sold for the 500 rand and this logo that is a little bit more zeros than that. And can you talk a little bit more about the role that you specifically play? And the reason that I'd like to go into it is because I think also as creatives, we can sometimes forget about the people that bring the creative brief to us, that get to understand the customer need and then communicate it to the creative team, and the art that actually goes in the process of turning a customer need into a brief that a creative knows how to ingest. So can you just talk a little bit about some of your thoughts on that, whether it's related to this specific project or just your general thinking?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. A $5 logo or fiver has its place, that is for sure, but it is that much more potent and applicable when it is linked to thought, to theory.
Yeah.
And the theory is derived directly from the client. It's quite interesting, actually. I presented Brand Inception to a client, I think 2 weeks ago, and he said, it's kind of like I've just had a session with a psychologist. But what we have to remember is that really good psychologists mirror. They listen and then they mirror. They reflect what you have just told them. So I almost feel a little bit like imposter syndrome is a very heavy-handed term. I don't feel like that, but I almost feel like, but you told me this. I'm not making this stuff up. This comes from you. But it's about hearing it and then presenting it back to the client in a way and in an eloquence, using language beautifully that allows them to, it's almost like shining up their thoughts, polishing their thoughts so that when they hear it back, I'm not making it up, they made it up, but we've shone it up to such a degree that it sounds elevated. And that's the basis for our brand inception work, where it comes from the client. This stuff we don't suck out of thin air. It's off the back of a very in-depth and well-considered insights workshop that we conduct with our clients. That, the questions that we ask have been formulated over decade-long careers here. So it in many respects, I suppose, is like going to the therapy chair, it's sitting there and feeling heard, and that's what we reflect back. And from there, we then build out the brand assets. And, the logo is such a microscopic part of that. In fact, often it's the bit that we do last. We present it first always because I think it's convention, but it's often the thing that gets done right at the end because a brand is so much more. It's about capturing, again, the stuff that's going to solve the pain point for the end user. So, we like to think that our process is deeper because of the thought that goes into the design.
Yeah, I think it's very apparent as well. As when Alfie was presenting it, it is definitely shows that.
Definitely.
Oh, thank you.
So unfortunately, as much as I love having conversations with you guys, we are drawing to the close of this conversation. And so I'd like to do a little bit of an exercise that we sort of ended off our last conversation with Sabeeha with. And as you guys know me and my theatrics, I like to bring in a little bit of experience into the process. So I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. And I want you to think back. Think back to right before you either joined Jack or moved into the specific discipline that you're in right now. And I want you to imagine that version of yourself, whether it's right before you had that first meeting with Sabeeha, or it was right before being connected to the wider team. And that's a part of yourself that I'd like you to talk to. And I'd like you to think about this question. Imagine you're sitting across from your past self, and you're about to embark on this journey with Jack. What advice would you want to give that version of yourself, knowing now what you've been through along this journey, the difficulties, the successes, and everything in between? And I'm going to ask you to start, Claire, and then Paul, you can go afterwards.
I would say to myself, trust your instincts. These are good people. These are the right people. These are your people. There's nothing to be fearful of here. That's what I would say. Dive in, give it everything.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Paul?
I would say stop being so hard on yourself. Go to therapy sooner. Stop the people pleasing. You're going to get everything you want. So be careful what you ask for, and embrace the change, because it's going to happen, and you are going to eventually embrace it, but start embracing it now. Maybe things will go maybe it'll be a bit less painful.
Amazing. And I think that is great advice for all of the designers out there, all of the creatives who are kind of entering a new space, entering something a little bit more uncertain. There's a reason to be optimistic. There is a reason to be optimistic.
Of course.
And I think we can kind of like wrap our conversation up there. I think for everybody listening, we look forward to our next conversation with you, where we will be chatting to Dylan and Claudia, the other two designers from the amazing team of Jack. But until then, thank you very much for your time. And Claire and Paul, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you for having
Excellent.
us.
Thanks, Alfie. Thanks, Stephanie. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. And thanks for everyone listening. See you soon.